Welcome to our JavaScript web course. In this video, we will look at some DOM methods that allow us to work with attributes that can create some nice interactive effects similar to the one we see here. This is something you very commonly see on the internet. You click to display more content. You click again, the content goes away. Sometimes we change an icon, sometimes we change the text. Sometimes we do both. Let's look at the HTML coding here. And one thing I would like to point out, when you plan a JavaScript interaction, you need to make sure that your HTML is coded in a manner that's going to easily work with it. You just can't use any old HTML and think that you can make something happen with JavaScript. It has to be logically created first. So here I have a section element, and that has an ID, which means that everything inside that section can be accessed uniquely via the ID attribute. I have an H2 that says show more, and underneath that I have a div. Now that div contains two paragraphs. It really doesn't matter what's inside the div because the div is the element that we're going to be working with, not what's inside it. What's inside it will just be inside it. So as you saw in the demonstration, we're going to click on that H2 that says show more, and we're going to display the content. Notice on the web page the content is not shown. That is because we have a class equals hide in this div. That class sets the CSS display property to none. Therefore, that content is not shown on the page. If you were to use the browser's inspect tool to just examine the HTML right now, you can see that this div element is grayed out because technically it's not on the web page. So what we're going to be doing, we'll be clicking on that H2. How do we access that? We can access that by first referencing its parent, which has an ID, and then from there we can reference the H2 using getElements by tag name, which is a collection. So here in my code I have let section element equal document.getElement by ID info. Now let me point out one thing, that when I say document.get, I'm referring to document being the web page or the body. Now I am going to make a reference to this H2, which is a child of section element. So here I have let H2 element equal section element dot get elements by tag name. Notice that I am preceding the get elements by tag name method by the parent, which is section element. If I was using the document, it would return every H2 element on this page. We don't want to return every H2 element. We're only concerned with the H2 that is inside this section with this unique ID. Now, getElements by tag name returns a collection, which is an array. Therefore, we want to specify which index position we want. It's the first one, so we will use 0. Now we will set up our click event. H2 element.onClick equals show hide, which is the name of the function that will be creating this interaction when the user clicks on that H2. So here's my function, show hide, and this is a demo file for you, so I have a lot of comments in it. So let me scroll down to the actual code. But before we look at this code, let's look at the logic of what we're doing. So over here, we're clicking, showing, changing, clicking, showing, changing. So we have what is called a toggle. You do something and you undo it. You do something and you undo it. And that's done by essentially using an if-else. Now let's refresh this HTML because the HTML and CSS is very important when working with JavaScript. We're going to be manipulating this div. It has a class of hide. So what we're going to be doing, we're going to be testing for this attribute. So if it has the attribute, we're going to remove it. If it doesn't have the attribute, we're going to add it. Very simple. At the same time, we're going to be changing the inner HTML of that H2. Again, we're clicking on the H2 and we're manipulating the attribute inside the element that is the sibling of H2. So we can refer to this div as the next element sibling. The point being that you can refer to things on the page without having IDs or classes in them. Okay, so here's our if. Oh, and by the way, because we clicked on that H2, we can automatically refer to it using the JavaScript keyword this. So I have if this dot next element sibling dot has attribute class. Okay, number one, we're checking to see if it has the attribute. And now we're checking to see the value. And this dot next element sibling dot get attribute class equals hide. So does it have this attribute class, and is this attribute value hide? Because it could have a different class value. Also, an element can have more than one CSS class attached to it. So if it does have the attribute class equals hide set, which it does when the page loads, it means that condition is true and the code inside the curly braces will execute. So what are we executing? Okay, this dot next element sibling dot remove attribute class, we're removing it. And now this dot inner HTML equals show less, we're changing the text. Else, meaning it doesn't have the class, meaning it's already been clicked on, then we're going to set the attribute, this dot next element sibling dot set attribute class hide, and we're going to change the inner HTML back to show more. So we're going back and forth between these two blocks of code based on what the user is doing. So let's watch what happens here in the inspector. This is not the console now. This is the inspector where we're looking at our HTML. So when the page loads, the div is hidden. We can see that the code is grayed out. Now, and it has the class equals hide. You can see that there. Watch what happens the minute I click on show more. Notice the HTML in the inspector just changed. Okay, I can see the inner HTML. I can see the text inside the H2. I can see that div. It's bright blue now. And I can see that there is no class attribute in there. Now when I click show less, we go back. We see the class. We see the code is grayed out. So this inspector is a very good friend of yours when it comes to working with certain types of interactions on the web page. So this is an overview of an example using these attribute methods and also some other methods that we are learning this week.